There's a lot to get to with Nik Lewis. Let's bring him in. It's funny because he is in this year's Hall of Fame induction class. Hey, Nick, welcome to the program. We're going to talk some Cowboys, some Monday Night Football. But they're inducting another Hall of Fame class this week, as you know, in Hamilton. Roy Shivers and Paul McCallum. Does it make you feel old that you were in the last class already, Nick?
It does make me feel a little old, but it's a good class. I seen with Ricky Ray and Chip Cox getting in as first ballot Hall of Famers. So Roy Shivers finally in the Hall of Fame where he belongs. So it's really good to see Roy in.
Absolutely. And I say kudos to all those guys. And I'll tell you, Southern Ontario, they're buzzing. My phone's blowing up. Everybody's excited about the induction. Can you take me back to that night and the days surrounding it? I didn't expect to go down that road, but we might as well. It was in June this year. Was it everything that you expected for an experience?
You know what? It was a pretty good experience. And I think the biggest thing for me was being able to hang around guys like Mike Walker and the rest of the guys for the weekend, seeing Hank again. I haven't seen Hank since the Ottawa Grey Cup. I think that was in 2017. So seeing Hank and just seeing the rest of the guys there that had waited so long, one to be inducted, that 2020 class. It was 2 years for their induction, being able to see Huff and catch up with him. So just listening to the stories, telling stories was great, right? Because you knew what they put into it to get there. And at the end of the day, I mean, Don Wilson and the rest of the guys, man, it was just such a fun weekend.
Yeah, well, quite a game, too, to have the Calgary Stampeders there in Hamilton for it. 8th biggest comeback in CFL history. So I'm not totally sure how this is working, but it's Winnipeg at Hamilton again this week. So they're having 2 inductions in the same year. I would have done it differently, but of course, they don't ask me, nor should they. I'll throw in some predictions for the Stanley Cup Final. We're asking our viewers today. Ted in Red Deer says Hurricanes and Avalanche. Exact same as Darren Moose DuPont. Tacona in Winnipeg says the Rangers versus Colorado. That's the same pick as Serena. And Jack Fulton in Alberta. Vulcan, Alberta says the Oilers and the Panthers. Before we examine all the other things going on in the CFL, Nick, what is your take, if you don't mind, on Bo Levi Mitchell being, to use Mark Stevens' term, the second and third string quarterback, depending on the time, with the Calgary Stampeders? I just never saw it coming.
You know what? It's a young man's game, but at the same time, Bo still has so much ability to be great. And I just go back 11 years ago when Henry Burris was benched for Drew Tate. It was the same thing, right? It was this iconic quarterback in Henry Burris who had led us to a Grey Cup, and we won more games in the regular season than any other team. And it wasn't even close, but it was felt that it was time to make a move. And Jake played well last year. I believe Jake executes the offense a little bit better than Bo does right now to the talent that the Stampeders have. Bo's a big play quarterback. I think the dynamic of the team has changed over the last couple of years, and that really doesn't play well for Bo and his playing style. So I think it's more of a style of play than it is a talent thing. I mean, Bo still got a strong arm. Bo can still go put up big numbers in this league, and he will in the future. I mean, greatness doesn't leave you. He's going to always be great.
So my last point on this, I don't know. People in Calgary are watching on Game Plus TV texting me saying Bo's not leaving Calgary. But they sound like they know, but I don't even know who they are. So how do you think this plays out? Does he finish this season in Calgary? And does he finish his career in Calgary? What do you think?
He finishes the season in Calgary. Bo's still a young man. He's in his early 30s. So I could see Bo going to another team next year as a free agent and being able to go out there and put up big numbers. I mean, if you look at the CFL right now, you have Zach Caleros and Nathan Rourke as the only 2 quarterbacks that I would say are the quarterbacks for teams that they're not going to make a change off of that. But the other teams are pretty much open. So I think Bo has the pick of the litter. He'll be the number 1 free agent, and he'll go put up some big numbers. But, Huff and Dave know that Bo can still put up big numbers. It's just a matter of they have their guy that runs the offense a little bit better right now for what they need.
Do you want to move on to the National Football League, or do you have any other CFL takes before we do move on to the NFL?
No, I think, last week we had a couple blowouts, and, we're looking forward to seeing when the teams play each other back to back and you get a blowout in the second game, it's about meeting that energy level. And, a lot of the stuff that I come on and say here and everywhere else, I always want to make sure, Rod, it's always in perspective of, we talk about Cody Fajardo a lot. I thought Cody stepped up on Labor Day, had his best game of the season. And sometimes I feel like I be beating up on these guys, and I never wanted to come across like that. But we have to give an honest assessment of what we're seeing and how we view it. So, and the fans should want that, right? They should want the honesty of what's going on in these organizations, but also the truth about their quarterback or their situations. And I feel like, to my knowledge, I try to display that.
You do, and so do I. And I know that, I'm going to tell you something. The vast, vast majority of the viewers do love it. That's why we're growing and you're on to great things. But it's shocking to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because they've been spoon-fed the pablum for so long, not just in the CFL, but in the NFL, NHL. All the media is they're just disseminating what the teams want you to hear. And we're not doing that.
Well,
And
those
it's
team
ruffling
radio,
feathers.
those team stations, right? They want you to talk nice about their team. When you get into the Raptors and you get into the Blue Jays and everybody out there, you have to talk nice about them. You can't really tell the truth, and that's where the misconception comes in with the fan base. And fans always, and which they should, lead with their heart, not their head. And the decisions being made by an organization, like we love Bo. I love Bo. He's one of great friends of mine. I talked to Bo on probably a couple times since he been benched, even a couple times before that, and just understanding his mindset and just making sure that he's pouring into Mayer to make sure he can be the best he can be, right? Because he didn't make that decision. So it's good.
Trust me, I get it, and I feel today we've gotten to the bottom of the Bo Levi Mitchell situation to the degree that we know both you and Mark Steven don't expect him to be going anywhere this year. And to be honest, to me, that's a credit to Bo swallowing his ego quite a bit.
Remember, Drew got hurt. Drew got hurt in the game in 2011, and they had to bring Hank in the second half. So you never know what's going to happen over the course, and they know they have the best chance to win if Bo's the starting quarterback outside of Mayer.
Yeah, so the game humbles you. Life humbles you.
That's it.
And that's what Bo's going through right now. Ted in Red Deer wants to know if you have your designs any interest in a GM type job in the Canadian Football League.
Well, I'm looking more towards the ownership, but I don't think people understand how hard it is to construct 53 or 46 men from different countries, different backgrounds. You never know how people are going to feed off each other, what's going to be deterrent in the locker room, what's going to be deterrent on the field, what's going to happen. And it's all an experiment, and I believe that's the beauty part of what we watch on a weekly basis. I remember I was talking to somebody, and they were talking about offense. Like, to make one offensive play work, how amazing that is for all these moving parts to come together for one good play. Now you have to repeat that consistently. And I just think when it comes to making moves, when it comes to re-signing and doing those things, it's a very tough job that even myself, I don't think I could do. I would have to really tap into some people like John Murphy and Chris Jones and others and John Huffnagel, because they have experience of scouting, recruiting, understanding value, when to say no, when to go above and beyond, and all that's a feel thing. But, the GMs bring the players in, the coaches coach the players. Sometimes GMs bring in players that are great athletes but not great football players, but you still have to coach those non-great football players to get the best out of them.
Wow, you make a wonderful point. Chad in Winnipeg says, this world is getting too soft. The truth hurts sometimes. It's a fact. From Bailey Nabe on YouTube says, Thick Nick, absolute legend of the game. From Tacona in Winnipeg says, did Nick say he wants to own the 7th CFL team? Yes, he did. Or one of the 9. From John Ohm in Winnipeg. Tons of respect for Nick. We need this guy in the CFL at any capacity. Smart individual. Yes, he is. And it's interesting that you would say you're not interested in the GM role because I said that earlier. I'm not either. I don't want to do the job. I wonder why so many GMs get so prickly with the analysis that we give, and coaches too, because when people tell me what to do in the mental health recovery field, Nick, and you've seen now me in action how I do it, I don't care what they say because I know what to do. You can say whatever the hell you want because I'm going to do what I do with a very high success rate. Or people get upset or tell us what to do with this show. I don't listen to them because I know what I'm doing, and we grow. Why do GMs and coaches get so upset at what people say about them? Because they should have confidence in doing what they do.
100%. Only thing you could do as a coach or a GM is improve probability. Last night, 64-yard field goal. Could you improve the probability of making a shorter field goal? You look at the Tennessee Titan game. They said, okay, we'll kick a 47, 49-yard field goal, but you had time to improve the probability of the make by gaining extra yards and then using that timeout. So I would never say do what the Broncos did last night with 2 timeouts. I had a minute left on the clock to improve the probability. And the same thing with GMs. Like, you bring in certain players to improve the probability of the success of the team. But that's also a reason, if you notice, Calgary's not big in free agency because they don't want the other culture coming into their locker room. They want you to come in fresh, create the culture, show you what the culture is, and now you're part of the culture. So that's why Calgary never really big in the free agency game to go out and bring in a lot of the top stars. Now, if you're a good player, they would like to bring you in, but you got to be a culture fit.
Okay, so listen, next segment will be all NFL. In the 3 minutes we had. I know. I want to finish this on the CFL. So with the Rough Riders, I just want your take on what's gone on with Garrett Marino and Duke Williams and guys that they didn't fit the culture that we had when I was there. Clearly, they wouldn't fit in Calgary. What do you see going on with the Saskatchewan Rough Riders of late and moving ahead?
Well, at the end of the day, it's all grown men, right? And we want the best players, but sometimes the best players aren't the best people. And those things do reflect on younger teams. And if you look at the Riders and the leadership in there, you have Cody on the offensive side, but what other guys not – everybody's young. Like Shaq Evans is still young. Kyron Moore is still young. Jamal Murrow is young. There's a lot of young guys. The oldest one of the main factors is Duke Williams. Been in Edmonton, been successful, been to the NFL, made some great plays, stayed there for a few years. His influence on those young guys is ultimately what you're going to see on a daily basis. Emmanuel Arsenault in Edmonton doesn't have to be a 1,000-yard receiver. He's a guy that could be in that locker room that's going to be respected, a positive influence for all the receivers, the rest of the offense, and you're going to see continual growth like you have seen from those young receivers. So just understanding those factors. And on the defensive side, you have Charleston Hughes, you have a Larry Dean, Sankey still young, secondary still young. So it's just about putting people in there that can bring positive results. And I just think when you have a veteran team, Marino doesn't affect it that much. But when you have a young team, it does, right? Everything, you're like in the wind. You want to have constant momentum going forward, and every negativity just makes it that much harder to overcome the challenges.
Yeah, and it's not like there's anything major going on behind the scenes. We see it on the field. They have lost 6 of their last 8. Question coming out of week 1, Nick, is the season over with the broken thumb suffered by one Dakota Prescott?
And season over if Dak was playing. Let's be honest. Like, look at what Dak did. You got a whole off season. You say this is the first time you didn't have to worry about rehabbing. You could focus on everything that you needed to focus on. He's inaccurate. And that's one of the biggest things with Dak is if you don't have a run game, you can't play off a play action. Dak is a very average quarterback. When you can play action, put him on the edge, he's got a strong arm. He can make certain throws, but it just opens up the freedom for Dak. But if you don't get the run game going, they don't have a chance. And I believe when a lot of people talk about Zeke in the first year of why Zeke was doing what he was doing, it was because both of them were playing at a high level. And ever since then, Dak hadn't played at a high level. And everybody knows if you can stop the Cowboys' run game, Dak won't make the throws to beat you.
It's very depressing. Well, do we see this a lot? You get paid and your play drops off. You're supposed to get paid and your play pick up.
Your play only picks up in the last year of your contract, right? And that's when most people have their best year because they're so focused and everything is so intently on every play. And like even going back to the GM situation, we knew Dak. You can win with Dak, just like you can win with Cody and all these other quarterbacks in different leagues. But some people need better athletes around them. Dak needs better receivers around him to make up for some of his inefficiencies. And when you pay him $45 million, that takes away some of the weapons around him, and now he's vulnerable. At the end of the day, he's still getting paid, which I root for all players to get paid, but it cost him the ability of really building a legacy. Because when you had Michael Gallup and Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb and Cedric Wilson, you were way better. And for the Cowboys not to bring back Cedric Wilson, who to me was one of the standouts last year, it was a big hurt for us.
Led the NFL in points and yards per game last season, and now this. But I'll just say this. I wonder how big of a believer you are in analytics. I am to a point.
Yeah.
But I was reading an article the other day on The Athletic about this. They're like, Tom Brady's great, but when you put him up against Aaron Rodgers and certain Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes of his era, what Tom benefited from both in Tampa and New England was better play on special teams and defense. And they had this quotient. The defense and special teams were better on the Patriots and Bucks than they were on the Packers and the Chiefs and Seahawks. I'm like, well, yeah, we all know that. Tom took less money to spread around those positions, correct, Nick? How is this news?
Yeah, most of the teams in the last 10 years have had a quarterback in their first 5 years, or Tom Brady, who took less money to be able to spread that money out, bring in better talent around them. Because probability. If I'm starting at my own 20-yard line every drive, or inside my own 30 every drive, I have a less chance to score a lot of points. If I'm getting short field after short field, those 3s and 7s, then I'm going to score more points and win more games. So everything plays a factor in football when you look at it. And I've never understood that growing up, they say defense wins championships. But now over the last 10 years, it's been quarterbacks and they got to win championships and they have to do this to cement their legacies. It's not their fault that they're on a bad team and might be a great quarterback and put up great numbers, but it all plays a major part. Like Brad Johnson will never be better than Dan Marino, or Trent Dilfer will never be better.
But he's got a Super Bowl.
Right.
Yeah, well, listen, I'm looking at this because you're a Dallas guy. I'm looking at the stat. Where the hell was Kervontae Turpin? Okay, he had 4 returns, an average of 19.2 yards, 1 punt return for just 3 yards. Do you have a take on that story as a Dallas guy? And you know his story, obviously, at TCU.
Yep. Well, it's a feel-good story, but those guys fall through the cracks all the time and maybe can't learn a playbook. There's different things that factor in, and now just being a dynamic returner oversees everything else. And people are returning more out of the end zones now. Punt returns, every yard you can get really helps the offense success and improves the probability. So I think it's just a great fit for him being at home. I just hope he can control it, because when you take that long path, there's a lot of people that are part of that journey, and now you're back home, you're making some money. So I'm hoping that he's in a stable environment to keep succeeding.
Me too. Okay, Nick, what else you got on your mind before we let you go? What's new?
Man, nothing's really new, man. Just continue to grind, but just enjoying watching sports. It's been so great to watch the NFL back the first week, the CFL through Labor Day, and now everybody knows this is where the playoff runs happen. Baby Brady, Nathan Rourke is out, so I'm hoping for a healthy return for him, and just understanding that the CFL's prime, like, yeah, that's not as great, I would say, talent-wise as it's been, but it's still pretty even. I mean, Winnipeg is, even though they're only lost one game, I felt like they should have lost 4 or 5. They got outplayed, that they ended up winning because a team turned it over or missed a field goal or did things, and all credit due to them. But I think it's a little bit closer than people think, and it's not just a runaway that Winnipeg's going to win this thing.
Going to be fun down the stretch. Appreciate you coming in, Nick. Thanks for the insights. Enjoy the ball.
Appreciate it. You have a great one. I need that weather with you at.
Oh, it's the best. It is the best. The Hall of Famer Nik Lewis joining us today.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching the RP Show on YouTube. And don't forget, we're live daily on YouTube from noon to 2 Eastern. If you like what you see, hit subscribe. And if you like the program, check around for other segments of The Rod Pedersen Show here on YouTube.